The Intolerable Acts. Quite terrible. We can't tolerate them. They're the worst. Before we get to them, we have to have a little thing of a party. So, what kind of party are we having? Well, first off, it's gonna be a tea party. Why? Because the English people love tea. As you can see in this picture, look how much they're loving tea. This guy is holding the tea, and he's thinking like, man, I'm so excited to drink this tea. And all the ladies are like, I wish I have some tea right now. Tea's good. So from the 17th century, English people started drinking tea. Mainly it came from China. And English government, seeing that tea was very popular, they imposed taxes upon it. And it made it kind of expensive. So to avoid taxes, many people smuggled tea from Holland. So there's smuggled tea coming in from Holland. England, however, they're in the tea business. So 1773, there's the East India Company. Since so many people were buying smuggled tea and not theirs, the East India Company was losing a lot of money. East India Company, however, is a company in England. So since England wants it to be profitable, England says, we're going to pass the Tea Act. And the Tea Act made the tea that England's selling cheaper than smuggled tea. And the company can sell directly to the people. So it's produced in China or India, and it can be shipped right to America instead of having to pass through England for taxes. England does keep some taxes on it, sneakily, but for the most part, the tea is very cheap. Now, everyone thinks this is probably a great thing. Great, I can have some cheap tea. Fantastic. Life is good. However, there's some resistance, namely because many colonial leaders, such as Sam Adams, were smugglers. They were making their money, bringing in illegal goods, and it was creating great wealth for them. So the Tea Act is very harmful. Now there's tea that's much cheaper, and in response to these taxes, protests are organized. Sam Adams is one of the leaders of the Sons of Liberty, so they start organizing protests against the cheap tea. Namely, they are saying that there's still taxes on this tea, we do not have representation, so they are going on the no taxation without representation argument. Boston, of all cities, has the most vocal opponents, since they're making so much money with trade, most vocal opponents to prevent this tea from being sold. So, December 16, 1773, Governor Hutchinson, he refuses to allow 3 ships to leave Boston Harbor without paying the tax. These ships come into Boston Harbor to sell the tea, and people are saying, no, we're not going to buy it, thus you can't get your tax money. Governor Hutchinson says, no, the ships are here, so you have to pay a tax on them, even if you're not going to buy them. He realizes that England needs this money to pay for wars. So he's saying, we're keeping the ships here until taxes are paid by the city of Boston. Sons of Liberty, they take exception to this. They storm onto the ships. They're dressed as Mohawk Native Americans. And the reason they're dressed as Mohawk Native Americans is they're finally identifying themselves as Americans. There's no Mohawks in England. So they're identifying themselves solely as American citizens. And they storm the ships, and as you can see in this image, and as you know, they pour the tea into the harbor. It's a quite momentous occasion. It changes the course of history. And John Adams, he writes in his journal the next day that last night 3 cargoes of Bohea tea were emptied into the sea. This morning a man of war sails. So there's a warship. This is the most magnificent movement of all. There's dignity, a majesty, a sublimity in this last effort of the patriots that I greatly admire. The people should never rise without doing something to be remembered, something notable and striking. So, it's a momentous event that even the day after this, that John Adams is recognizing. England is furious. They are furious to see what has happened. This is millions of dollars in today's money worth of tea. and they respond by what's known as the Intolerable Acts. In England, they call these the Coercive Acts. And the first one of the Intolerable Acts is the Boston Port Act. Remember, Boston at this time is making all of their money through trade, through shipping. They're not producing cotton and things like other colonies are. So England says, fine, you want to dump tea into the sea? Well, what we're doing is we are going to shut down your port. No ship can enter or leave until you have paid for the tea which has been destroyed. So the Boston Port Act is the number one act which the English start enforcing. And their assumption is that this will force the colonists to take responsibility for what they have done. But in fact, it just simply gets people more angry. The citizens of Boston now are united. Whereas previously, sure, Sam Adams is losing money, but how is cheap tea hurting everyone else? Well, now this lack of trade, trade keeps the city alive. So the Boston Port Act is the first of the Intolerable Acts. The second act, which the British include, is called the Massachusetts Government Act. So Massachusetts Government Act is what happens because the English are now upset with the leaders of Massachusetts. They take away their right for self-rule. So they say, fine, if you want to act this way, then you are unable to have your own sort of government. So we are removing your right to have town meetings. So this is one of the things that colonists had taken great pride in, was this ability to have town meetings. And it is now stolen from them by the government, saying, well, you are not acting in a way that you should. So Massachusetts Government Act is number 2. The third and of the acts, the third one that creates a lot of anger is what's called the Administration of Justice Act. And what this does is it allows the governor to take trials of people that are accused of crimes, and they're going to have those trials outside of Massachusetts. So instead of having a fair trial in Massachusetts, they're now going to Canada.